we have laws, presumably, that should be protecting people against this kind of stuff.
I really want to keep a straight face right now.
I know. Well, we do have laws that are supposed to protect people from this. What are a few of them? NCCP Act, Corps Act, ASIC is the regulator that oversees all of this stuff.
You've got
So
APRA.
why aren't they fixing it or doing something about it? Welcome to another episode of the Money Matters podcast. This is PJ Patterson of Intrepid Wealth. I'm here today again with Melissa Kuterich of Diva Enterprises. A little bit about Melissa. She leads Diva Enterprises, as I said. It's an education advocacy, let's get that word out, and risk mitigation company. They challenge outdated financial and legislated structures, ensuring that individuals, particularly women, are equipped with the knowledge and tools to protect themselves from financial abuse and systemic inequality. That's a lot.
That was a mouthful.
It is, but there's more. There's more. Melissa is a strategic disruptor, problem solver, and financial advocate with over 30 years of expertise navigating the complexities of construction, property development, financial restructuring, dispute resolution, and systemic risk. That's also a mouthful. Her work exposes and dismantles financial coercion, which we're going to be talking about today, which is an insidious form of control often legitimized through contracts, lending practices, and institutional oversight failures. Wow, that's a mouthful and a lot to talk about. She is committed to transforming the financial security, to transforming financial security from a privilege to a fundamental right, where knowledge is power, accountability is non-negotiable, and businesses operate with transparency, integrity, and resilience. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you, PJ. That was a mouthful.
Yeah.
And not expected. But in summary of all of that, it's basically dealing with the darker side of finance, as I say it, or the industry as a whole. And that pertains to virtually property development, construction, all sorts of things when we talk about building our assets.
Well, today we're going to continue on in this sort of podcast, what do you call it? Series, probably is the best word to look at, around coercion. And coercion particularly today in business settings, and unveiling the power and control that can often be, I suppose, forced on people in the business setting. So in the corporate context, tell us about coercion and kick us off on that topic.
What I would say in the corporate setting is that we consider coercive, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Is basically when you have, and if we're talking about an intimate relationship, I'm hoping that's where you want to start with.
Sure. Let's start there.
Okay. Well, if we're talking about an intimate relationship, you have, based on our experience in this country, we have more small, medium, small businesses. Couldn't even get that out today. But we have a lot of small businesses. So we have partners who begin a company. My God, can we start again?
Yeah, just keep going. We can edit all this out.
Fantastic.
So let's talk about coercion in the corporate context. So actually, what I think we want to talk about is in that employee, supplier, that sort of sphere. So let's kick it off with that.
When we look at the corporate structures, we could find ourselves working in an environment where the ethical compass does not work. The moral compass definitely doesn't work. And you may be expected or feel pressured to turn a blind eye to things where documents may have been provided, let's say in the financial space, documents may have been provided that don't look right. And even though you have passed that on to a supervisor or someone more senior, that facility goes through.
So this is in the context of an
Of
employee or
this is
someone
an
working in a business.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we're looking at employees or individuals that work, even subcontractors when we look at it, or that work in a organisation where the key factor is, unfortunately, your KPIs. And say, for instance, I have now come to you and I've said, and please don't take this the wrong way, because I know this is nothing you would do, but I've come to you and I've given you my concerns. So I've written all my notes, I've put the details down that I'm concerned that this particular facility that's been presented to me, that the financials that they've provided don't stack up. And it may be in a sense where, because I know we're going to, and this is segueing into what we're going to talk about, but it may be in a sense where we've got a couple that's been presented to us. It's very clear that she is a director, but really doesn't have much of a say of anything. You've put this down on your forms, you've given the details, you've gone to a supervisor, you've acknowledged that you have concerns, that you can't absolutely verify certain documentation that they've provided, and lo and behold, you then discover that that facility, that loan application was put through.
Mm-hmm. So the context of this then is more so around, say, a lending application to a bank.
Yes.
So something where a credit analyst was looking at something, wasn't quite happy with maybe the way it all was put together, or there's some discrepancies or something they just don't like. And a supervisor or someone above them might do what? Say, ignore that, I'll sign off on it, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
So how is that coercion?
Well, it's coercion because of the fact that you are now partaking in a manufactured facility.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at the corporate sense, you put that loan together, you are actually responsible and liable for that.
Mm-hmm.
Although you have brought to their attention, you've brought to your supervisor's attention that you haven't been able to verify certain documents, that you have your suspicions. You may have seen warning signs between the clients. You have now created a facility, because even though as brokers we are responsible for verification, so is the lender, but ultimately you've raised that to your supervisor, they have then ignored that, put that through. That is coercion. That supervisor should have taken matters and dealt with things differently, should have taken matters seriously, investigated it. They're probably more experienced anyway, but they've got their own due diligence they need to uphold for the organisation. Ultimately, you are at fault. So when you look at coercion, in a sense, it's just another word for manipulation, or, as I say, turning a blind eye
Mm-hmm.
to what is obvious.
Mm-hmm. And this must be going on enough to keep someone like you very busy in this space, I guess. Is that what you're finding at the moment?
For the last 30 years, it's been very obvious that these kind of acts continue on. And I always say that it has to stop at grassroots, which is with professionals, because ultimately you are the conduit
Mm-hmm.
to create a legal binding document and facility. So yes, this has gone on for decades.
So we have talked about from a professional point of view. Before we go on to maybe how brokers and other professionals can protect themselves, we have laws, presumably, that should be protecting people against this kind of stuff.
I really want to keep a straight face right now.
I know. Well, we do have laws that are supposed to protect people from this. What are a few of them? NCCP Act, Corps Act, ASIC is the regulator that oversees
Yes,
all of this stuff.
You've got
So why
APRA.
aren't they fixing it or doing something about it? Keep a straight face.
And be nice. That is the $1 million question. I say that in that way because of the fact that we have seen and we have also produced evidence to various regulators that don't really need much investigation, and nothing has been done. The problem is what we don't see in the background is the documentation and the strategy that is used to protect, can I just say perpetrators or operators? Which way do we?
Either one probably works.
Yeah, perpetrators.
Well, they're operators and then maybe they become perpetrators.
How's that? Okay. So when we get colourful operators, let's just put it that way, colourful operators, they tend to use the standard procedures. So let's just say we have a, can I use a property scheme?
Sure, we're going to get into that later, so absolutely. What kind of property scheme?
You did have to ask me that.
Like a property developer or something like that.
So we've got a property developer who has advertised and pitched a wonderful development site, and now they have raised a lot of public money. They have not gone to normal or your conventional lenders. They've gone to various private lenders and so on and so on. The funds that they have raised end up being misappropriated and the development doesn't go through. So when people start to request for their funds and want the returns, the easiest thing is to close down the company, liquidate, appoint an administrator, liquidate the company, and then some of them go bankrupt, but then you have, can I just say, Buckley's to none to try and recoup. You may go to our regulators, and what you'll find is that it can be more frustrating than anything else, but also very costly. Because it seems to have a veil of protection, because they have gone to various other cohorts to protect themselves. So it makes it difficult for regulators, because there's always that gap that they can bypass. There's always a loophole somewhere. And like anything, even with the law, we have that many varieties. I like saying varieties. That many roads of protection that they can utilize.
These are the perpetrators.
Yes, this is the colourful operator. And sadly, it's the victim that loses a lot of money. And I know we're going to touch into other
we are going to talk about that in another segment, specifically titled, I imagine, Property Development Schemes and What to Look Out For. So definitely listen to that one when it comes out. Just coming back, though, to the sort of the corporate coercion and context, what can professionals, people working in the corporate sphere, do to protect themselves against coercion, or if they sense perhaps that they are in a situation where there is coercion?
Besides basically educating their staff, first and foremost, to pick up the warning signs, because the warning signs are there. They can be overshadowed. And let's face it, we all have lives beyond our work life. And you can miss certain things. I'd say number one is protection. Number two is definitely, number one is education. Number two would always be when you are putting through, let's say again, we're talking about brokers. When you are putting through an application, notes, and more notes. Those detailed notes, even of your gut feeling of things that may seem inconsistent to you, you should always write them down, regardless, because you've just covered yourself. I say that there's also, if you could initiate policies now that are updated when it comes to how you would handle this kind of situation within your organisation. That also helps all the staff, but it helps you manage incident reporting and obligations that now you could face interrogation or be drawn into without suspecting that it has any relevance to you whatsoever. I find that when it comes to creating I've got to use a different word, when it comes to loan applications or facilities or anything to do with finance whatsoever, that we have our own compliance, which is very stringent, but we can also be blamed by lenders who ultimately provide the funds, create the documents, and they have to be executed. But they too hold a serious and significant responsibility to double check, verify everything that has been submitted before handing over documents and funds.
Mm-hmm. Let's say they get to the point where maybe they think there's some coercion happening or what have you, and nothing's being done about it. We have this whistleblower law in Australia. I don't know how recently it was brought into effect. I remember hearing about it. I don't know much about it. What can you tell us about if you want to whistleblow? And how would you go about doing that? What are the protections you're afforded? Does anything even happen if you blow the whistle on somebody?
Unfortunately, sometimes no. And when it comes to, I even hate that word too, whistleblowing. Unfortunately, when it comes to doing the right thing and speaking out, a lot of people are reluctant, regardless of the protection laws that have been amended. I believe they were amended last year again. Do not quote me on that. I tend to ignore some of those protections only because I find that it's all based on a personal perspective. I would say you could easily direct the client or the person to ASIC's websites, various websites that they can go to check it out. ASICS is your best one when it comes to really investigating whether, licenses are involved or permits, permissions, and so on and so on.
But in terms of whistleblowing, I do recall ASIC has a specific page, I think, if you want to report something as a whistleblower.
Yes,
they do. Is that right? Yep.
And that's all confidential.
Mm-hmm. There's
many avenues. Every single regulator has that ability.
Mm-hmm.
AFCA, APRA,
mm-hmm.
same. They all have that ability that you can just go online, anonymously report.
Now, are you across any case or situation where someone blew the whistle, and what happened as a result of that? Do you have any firsthand knowledge of something like that?
Did you have to ask that?
I think the answer is yes.
Yes, but I've got a good and bad outcome. Which one do you want to hear?
Well, the good outcome obviously probably means that the report was followed up on, something happened, and, it was a good thing, perhaps. Let's talk about the bad, because I think, unfortunately, Hollywood and the movies dramatize the whistleblower. They make them out to be the hero and often saving the day and whatnot, even though, some of the drama around that, particularly a movie with
I'm
Russell
not a
Crowe.
Movie buff.
That's okay. Russell Crowe was it was a movie about, I think, the tobacco industry. He was a scientist, exposed it, was threatened, coerced, the whole shooting match. Exonerated later, obviously.
I still love Erin Brockovich.
Yeah, well, that's another good one, right? Same sort of deal. She exposed a thing and was threatened, bullied, the whole shooting match. So tell us about a story where maybe it didn't end well.
We had one particular woman who had been significantly ruined because she spoke out.
Mm-hmm.
And what had occurred there was that she was also made out to be the one that was actually lying and falsely accusing, defamation, all sorts of things. That did end up in court. It cost a lot of money to defend the claims of defamation.
So in that case, just before you go on with the story, in that case, was this before whistleblower laws were amended or updated? Because I would have thought that it would have been hard to get a whistleblower into court because of the anonymity of it or the privacy protections. So in this case, that didn't happen.
No, there's always, the law is very broad, as we know. But in this case, whilst there are privacy and anonymity and so on, let's face it, you can find anyone these days. And people like to talk. It was alleged that it was her, and it was, and she had every right. After court, she made a commercial decision because she had already lost their home by now. Made a commercial decision, and it was only 9 months later. Don't quote me on that, whether it was 9 months or just a bit more, but it was proven that she was right. After all that, so she went through the legal system, she endured so much.
So that story did end well or didn't? It sounds like she lost a lot to get to the end game, which was to be exonerated.
She lost more than a lot. And whilst she may have been acknowledged, exonerated, as you said, it didn't mean anything.
Didn't really matter for her.
No, didn't matter.
That's not a good tale around whistleblowing because, you know, again, I go back to the whistleblowers often made out to be this hero. And if anything, that would now cause someone who might be thinking about blowing the whistle on their organization to not do it.
But that's why this law is actually really good. The amendments that were made are actually beneficial.
Good. I'm glad you said that because I was about to say or ask you, has anything changed?
I told you
so
I
the
was
law,
dark. I told you.
So the law has been updated and changed to give whistleblowers more protection.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And I believe that there is some financial compensation around that too. But I'd have to get an expert to help you with that.
Well, we're drawing to a close on this particular topic. Is there anything more you'd like to say about corporate coercion and maybe one or two summary points for the listeners?
The first thing I would say is don't be afraid to speak up. First and foremost, it is your reputation. You don't want to stand in solidarity in a position that is going to harm others, but ultimately the blame can be made. The blame can shift and you could be held responsible innocently. Make that statement. Make that report. Even if it's anonymously, but do something. Don't just stand or sit on the fence when you know it's wrong, because you wouldn't want it to happen to you. And for organizations, I would suggest that you don't chase the bottom line. You don't look for replacing humans as a dollar sign, because we are at a time now that there are many changes going on. You can't hide anymore. It all comes out. So it's just a matter of putting yourself in that person's shoes rather than chasing the dollar. But for whistleblowers, I still hate that word, just do the right thing. There are many avenues out there, and now there is a law that protects you. So whilst that, yes, that was an awful story, but that was real. That was raw and real, and maybe not talked about. And this isn't a segment or a place that we're not going to discuss the dark side of life. There are good, bad, and indifferent in every situation. Just put yourself in that other person's shoes.
And do the right thing,
Right.
as Spike Lee famously made a movie about. I think that's a good way to end this podcast. Melissa, thank you very much for sharing your expertise and insights on corporate coercion. We're going to get a bit more deeper into that shortly.
Thank you.